The first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang, a lovely fellow with an appetite for conquering other states, killing members of his own family, surviving assassination attempts, building walls, burying scholars alive, burning books, and a search for a 1,000-year-old Taoist wizard to teach him the recipe to the elixir of life. He sent out 3,000 young men and 3,000 young women on a voyage to find it, but they never came back. Legend has it they discovered Japan and settled there instead of coming back to China. And I don't blame them, they probably didn't want to get buried alive. But I think deep down Qin Shi Huang knew that he was only mortal, because before he had even conquered all of China, he already started building his tomb near Xianyang, the capital of the Qin state and later all of China, which is modern-day Xi'an. His tomb is an incredible structure which has yet to be excavated, with many secrets hidden within, such as rivers of molten metal, an army of several thousand life-size terracotta soldiers, and even booby traps. So in this video, we are going to give you 7 incredible facts about the first emperor of China's tomb. Number 1. Immense size. The tomb complex took 38 years and 700,000 workers to complete, according to the writings of Sima Qian in the Shi Ji. The tomb complex, or the extent of it which has been discovered, covers 3.9 square miles. And this sits within the World Heritage Site area that has over 600 sites related to the Qin Emperor's tomb that covers an area of 56 square kilometers or 21 square miles. Archaeologists have even found the foundations of an imperial palace 1/4 of the size of the Forbidden City in Beijing. Palace consists of 18 courtyard-style houses and one main building that overlooks them. The palace foundations were unearthed in 2010, and archaeologists have found the remains of walls, gates, brickwork and pottery from the Qin dynasty 2,200 years ago. But the buildings are not still standing, this is just foundations and ruins. However, there is one thing that is still standing, and that is Number 2. The pyramid. Why do ancient civilizations all love pyramids? You can see them from Egypt to Mexico to China. Alright, I know, they're for landing alien spaceships on top of. That's the most likely explanation. But pyramids have also been used all over the world for tombs, although the ones in China are kind of in disguise. They are made of rammed earth, so now most of them have vegetation growing on top of them. Some farmers even grew rice and other crops on them, and they end up just looking like small hills. The pyramid, or burial mound that sits above the first emperor of China's burial chamber, was originally 76 meters or 249 feet tall, and around 50 meters or 164 feet of that survives. That puts it at about half the height of the Luxor Hotel Pyramid in Las Vegas and about 1/3 of the height of the Great Pyramid at Giza in Egypt. However, it is what's under the ground that is most impressive. Number 3. Terracotta Warriors. In 1974, some workers in the area were drilling a well when they unearthed a chamber with 8,000 terracotta warriors standing in formation inside. These clay soldiers were to protect the Qin Emperor in the afterlife, and they have become the world-famous Terracotta Army. The clay figures come in several variations, but they do have individually detailed faces. There are also horses and chariots, and some of the soldiers are carrying swords made out of an unusual 13-element alloy, and they are still sharp to this day. The main pits where the Terracotta Army were found are about 3/4 of a mile from the main area of the tomb. The soldiers face east, the direction of the Qin army's campaign to conquer all of China. But these warriors are still not inside the tomb itself, so let's now actually take you below the pyramid into the Qin Emperor's burial chamber. Number 4. Buried under 3 underground rivers. Historian Sima Qian wrote that workers dug down through 3 springs or underground rivers and poured bronze down to seal the tomb and create the outer coffin. There's also an underground dam that protects the tomb from groundwater, and it is 84 meters or 275 feet thick at its thickest point, and it's made from a different type of earth as the surrounding area. This has stopped groundwater from entering the tomb, but it isn't just water that the first emperor wanted to keep out. Number 5. Booby traps. Tombs of important people in history are all known for one thing: booby traps. Of the first emperor's tomb, historian Sima Qian wrote this: artisans were ordered to install mechanically triggered crossbows set to shoot any intruder. So the idea is that anyone who tried to raid the tomb would face a barrage of arrows. Since other parts of Sima Qian's writings about the first emperor's tomb have been proven true in science, we'll tell you what those are in a moment, it is safe to assume that there really are mechanical crossbows inside the first emperor's tomb. But would they work 2,200 years later? It is highly likely that the metal has corroded or fused together, and the wood or rope elements have already decomposed. So probably no. But still, Chinese authorities have not allowed for the tomb to be explored yet, and this is probably due to this and some other reasons, like our next one. Number 6. Rivers of Mercury. Sima Qian wrote in the Shi Ji, Mercury was used to represent the various waterways of the Yangtze and Yellow rivers and the Great Sea, being made by some mechanism to flow into each other, and above they were arranged the heavenly constellations, and below was the layout of the land. So the tomb was literally supposed to have liquid mercury flowing through a map of the waterways of the Chinese Empire. And this is one of the facts that has been proven through scientific study, or at least the presence of mercury has been proven. A 1983 study of soil samples on the burial mound detected high levels of mercury compared to the standard background levels in the area. The author stated, the anomaly presented a direct evidence for the authenticity of accounts stated in the Shi Ji, that there existed a large mercury reservoir in the underground basement of the emperor's mausoleum. Then there was also a 2016 study using laser beams to detect mercury emissions seeping out of cracks in the burial mound. This study also concluded that there were indeed elevated levels of mercury in the air above the tomb. So it seems the Qin did have the ability to produce large quantities of mercury to fill up underground rivers and seas. And this mercury thus added another layer of difficulty to any potential grave robber who did get past the mechanical crossbows. The mercury would give off a poisonous gas that would likely kill anyone that inhaled it. And that's just as well, because the tomb contained valuable artifacts that the emperor would need in the afterlife. Number 7. Treasures. Sima Qian wrote in the Shi Ji, replicas of palaces, pavilions, all the various officials, and wonderful vessels and other rare objects were brought up to the tomb, which was then filled with them. So we know that this tomb, like other tombs, was filled with the emperor's wealth, in the form of jewelry, gold, and priceless artifacts. We don't know the value of the wealth inside the main chamber of the tomb because it hasn't been allowed to be excavated yet. However, we do have some idea of the value of the Terracotta army. One Terracotta Warrior costs $4.5 million. We know this because there was a court case against a young guy who snuck into a Terracotta Warrior exhibit at the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia. He took a cheeky selfie with one of the warriors, and then he proceeded to remove the warrior's thumb. And the prosecution quoted the price of a single warrior in court when trying to work out the value of the thumb that he stole. Interestingly, this case resulted in a mistrial because 24-year-old Michael Rohana had been charged using laws reserved for jewelry thieves and major museum thefts. But his lawyer even said in court that this was not Ocean's 11 or Mission Impossible. It was just a case of youthful vandalism, and Mr. Rohana didn't even try to sell the thumb. He just kept it in a drawer, not knowing its value, not really even knowing what to do with it. The jury ended up not reaching a verdict, and thus he got off scot-free. I think he had to return the thumb though. But anyway, if one Terracotta Warrior costs $4.5 million, then the whole 8,000 of them would cost around $36 billion. If we add in the value of the other chariots and other types of figures that were with the Terracotta army, the horses, etc., it gets you to around $50 billion in value. But we don't know how much more value is buried inside the main burial chamber. It could be another $50 billion worth of treasure. And now for the piece of evidence that makes me think that what's buried inside is really valuable. Sima Qian wrote, "After the burial had taken place, someone mentioned the fact that the workers and craftsmen who had constructed the mechanical devices would know about all the buried treasures, and the importance of the treasures would immediately be disclosed. Consequently, when the great occasion was finished and after the treasures had been hidden away, the main entranceway to the tomb was shut off and the outer gate lowered, so that all the workers and craftsmen who had buried the treasure inside were shut in, and there were none who came out again." So the emperor's son actually had all of the key craftsmen who'd buried the treasure inside the tomb and knew its secrets buried alive inside with the emperor, and thus they could never divulge the secrets of the tomb to anyone, because they'd be dead. In addition to that, the emperor's concubines who did not have children were also buried alive in the tomb to accompany the emperor in the afterlife. I mean, at least he spared the ones that did have children. What a nice fellow. So if you did manage to make it past the crossbows and the rivers of Mercury and break into the tomb, not only will you find a vault of buried treasure, but you will also find a collection of the most beautiful women in China. The skeletons of the most beautiful women in China. And on that note, I think I have heard enough about the first emperor of China. I think if I lived in Qin times, I probably would have been buried alive by now too, simply for writing this script and disrespecting the emperor. The first emperor's achievement of uniting all of China was monumental, but the means with which he did it and the iron fist he ruled with afterwards caused a lot of suffering to millions of people. Fortunately, his dynasty was short-lived, and shortly after he died, rebellions erupted that paved the way for the Han Dynasty, China's first golden age. But the first emperor certainly left his mark on China, a mark that can never be forgotten. Thanks for watching, guys. Please subscribe to the channel for more cultural, historical, and linguistic content about China, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.